We have the challenge as the first panel to set the style of this meeting. And as Jürgen said, the most important here is not what the members of the panels are going to say. It is what you have to say and to contribute or to challenge on the topic, whatever suggestion. It is extremely important that we have a dialogue not between you and us, but between all of us together. Thank you very much for attending. This first panel is Essentials on IHE. And we have two questions that have been given to us to discuss, debate, and clarify. My name is Charles Parizeau. I'm a member of IHE International at the board level. I represent the membership at large at the last level, at the board level. The membership of IHE, about 550 organizations, made of vendors, providers, hospitals, healthcare authorities, ministries, consultants, and many entities that are interested to make interoperability flow better. I am also active in IHE Europe, and I'm working for GE Healthcare, where one of my tasks is to foster the development and the implementation of a consistent set of standards across the world and across our products. We need to start speaking of what's essential on IHE. And the question is asset, advantages, and weaknesses. This is one thing IHE loves to do, is to really identify the weaknesses and say, are those serious? Are those the most urgent? Is it the next one to fix? So my first statement on the asset is the process. IHE has engineered a process that is both global and local over now 14 years. And this process is refined, is flexible. The heart of the process is written in principle of governance. But there are many parts of the process that are good code of conduct. How do you do the work? How do you test? How do you define specification? How do you identify a need, a use case, or requirement? So in answering this question, I would say process definitely. To me, the second asset is the community. I can get answers to many questions from many people that I know because of IHE. My knowledge, half of it is in the people I know, half of it is in my head. And this is so valuable, in my opinion, in terms of e-health, which is a field which is quite complex, emerging, and interoperability being a big challenge. So that's definitely an advantage of IHE, and I believe that that advantage is also combined with an interesting balance of something which is international and project specific. What we've learned over the years is that we can define a profile for a use case, for a need in a global way. And I've always been surprised that everybody is saying, oh, you know, there will need to be so many local extensions, corrections, changes to deploy it in this country, that country, that country. And we are finding is it's a binary thing. Either the profile is totally unsuitable, it's rare, but it happens, or the profile can be used with very small, minor extension. And to me, this is the advantage of IHE and of its profile, is reuse. We are reusing a spec, we're reusing test tool, we are reusing education, we are reusing understanding. The weakness comes, in our opinion, on the challenge of understanding how to use IHE and its profile. If I may give you a quick image, before IHE, we were building houses from sand and trees. and trying to make bricks and trying to invent how to make windows and doors, and we were customizing them. The sand and the brick are the base standards. Those very important resources. What IHE is saying, no, we can make prefabricated windows and doors and stairs. You have a choice of different kind of windows. Pick the right window. You don't have to build your house from the raw material. You have prefabricated elements called profiles. Sounds great? Yeah, except you still need to understand how to build the house from prefabricated elements. And I think this is probably the biggest weakness of challenge that IHE has, is how can we better know and be more efficient in our projects where they are deploying IHE to assemble the profile in a nice house that meets the need of the project. So that's the weakness that I see and that I believe can be addressed and should be addressed. So those are my initial thoughts, but I'm sure the next panelist will introduce himself and provide his perspective. Claudio, it's yours.
Okay. Hi, thanks, Charles. My name is Claudio Saccavini. I am the technical manager of the consortium Arsenal.it. That is the competence center for telemedicine and e-healthcare for the Veneto region. Veneto region is a region of the northeast of Italy. I believe that you well know the capital of the Veneto, that is Venice. It is a very well-known city in the world. Yes, I involved since 10 years in IHE because I also the technical manager of IHE Italy, and I think that it is very important the approach of IHE. Consider that you can develop very complex projects. I engage and am responsible for a real project of Veneto region and some telemedicine network of the Veneto region using the IHE profiles. That is very important, as Charles said, that you can use the work of the world community and you find in the answers of your question in this work. It's very important. In fact, there are very few local customization to the profile in order to develop complex projects. And this is the differences of IHE and other standard organization and standard initiative. It is very important to underline that if you are looking to the IHE profiles, perhaps it's very easy that you find that there is no one answer to your question. And for example, I make my history. We need the workflow management in a project of Veneto region, because without this feature, we cannot develop the project to reach the goals of our political level. And so we ask into IHE, we need the profile about workflow management. And IHE committee says, yeah, fine, good. We need this profile. Please sit with us and write the profile. And so we're working together in the development committees. I'm also the co-chair of ITI planning committee. And we work together and we develop a new profile called XDW. This is very important. Working together, you spend less time to find the right solution to your problems in developing your regional or national project. So I think that this is the good part of IHE. On the other hand, there are some weaknesses, of course, because sometimes it's more easy to develop your own standard. It's more easy to write your specs without considering the standards. It seems that it's more it's faster to use this approach than to use the standard approach. I think that it seems, but it's not the reality, because when you try to give the maintenance of your project, because regional and national projects have to live 10, 15 years. I see the project of Canada. It is is a typical example. It's not a 3-year project, of course. You need to make an evolution of your project, and using standards and IHE, you find the right solution or the maintenance of the specs of your project. I think that is the more powerful answer that you can find in IHE initiative.
Thank you, Claudio. Let's move to Bert Claes. Introduce yourself.
Morning. My name is Geert Claes. I'm a member of the IHE Europe board. I was in the past founded in the class co-chair. I'm also now heading the IHE services committee. At this one time, I'm a member of IHE Health. One of my responsibilities there is to ensure that what we define here during the committee meetings are also implemented in our products. If you look to IHE and what's the main asset of the main typical part of IHE is the fact that we have an end-to-end approach. In the sense that our work does not stop if we have published our technical framework. Really, we also want to ensure that the technical framework is implemented in products, that those products are deployed in projects, in hospitals, or in regional projects. Because the ultimate goal of IHE is not producing standards or profiles, but it's to ensure that products work in the real world. So, the proof of the pudding is at eating, and in fact, we can only just we only can measure performance of IHE if we look to the field and see how many products have implemented IHE profiles and are deployed in projects. So, because of that, IHE spends effort in developing test tools, in helping development teams to test implementations. We are organizing the test sessions, the hackathons, which you can see here in Turkey and other places every year. And we're also promoting or publishing duration statements. We document the implementation of IHE in the products. In order to do that in a more professional way, we have started 2 years ago with creating a new group within the IHE Europe umbrella. It's called the IHE Services Group. And the goal of IHE Services is to provide testing services to vendors, to regional authorities, to hospitals, in a way to leverage the experiences from a hackathon. At this moment, a hackathon is a one-time event, 1 week per region, and the other 51 weeks you are lost. I mean, you have to do it yourself. I think that we believe there's a need to leverage the experiences of the team here who are developing, who is managing the hackathon, and also the Gazella platform, the test platform, to use that experience for your own project. So that's the reason why one of the main activities that IHE Services will provide is to use, to show that we can use the Gazella platform and the Gazella team in testing your products in your organizations. We can create virtual hackathons, we can host, we can help you in hosting your local hackathons within your organization. We can provide consultancy services to make a test plan, testing the IHE profiles, to review your test plans. We can eventually customize some of our test tools according to your specific interoperability needs, because we know for different regional projects, there's a lot of IHE profiles in it, but there's always a need for some more project-specific or country-specific extensions, which you also want to test, and we are willing to adopt our test to address those project-specific needs. So at the end, the goal of that is that we will help you to implement and to test the IHE profiles, and in that way we hope that the interoperability within healthcare will be improved.
Thank you, Gert. Hello.
Thank you, Charles. I I'm Haluk Çeliker. I'm the co-chair of IHE Turkey, and it's a great honor to have you here in this first World Summit, IHE World Summit. So it's I'll try to look at from our perspective as a national organization how we try to make this IHE working in Turkey or not working in Turkey, because two different angles. So as you said, Charles, assets, we have processes, is established, but weaknesses. So our organization, IHE Turkey, established in 2009, and now we have 6 companies testing, local companies testing their IHE profiles down there. It was 5 companies last year, so I think it's growing in Turkey. And 1 company is contributing EPSOS greatly. But however, whenever we come to the field, the ground, we don't have any success stories in the IHE success map. So I think there missed some point here in Turkey due to politics, because we are trying to engage MOH into the I would say game, influencing MOH that they could use IHE profiles to make their own projects, because now MOH is running big health information exchange projects, and including image exchange as well. But we don't see that MOH is using IHE profiles. So I think as an IHE Turkey, our next step should be engaged MOH. But in order to do that, I believe we have to create small success stories first. That's proving how the IHE is helping people, users, vendors, because it's not enough just having IHE profiles on the tender specification as long as you don't implement that well. Because I'm working for Siemens, I used to work for GE before, and then all of the products that we were selling IHE compliant tested in the connected nodes, but not in the these profiles are not in use in the field. And so we are having this connected zone this year. I think this was our success, and then we want to have it here in Turkey to also influence our decision makers in Turkey, and how IHE is contributing the healthcare environment, improving the healthcare system.
Thank you, Haluk. So it's time for you to tell us together, what do you think in terms of the essential of IHE? What are the assets in your point of view, advantages and weaknesses? Any opinion, any discussion, any challenge from what you've heard so far? You may agree, you may disagree, you may want to correct things. Let's have a good and open discussion. We'll give you the microphone so that everybody may hear.
I am Ahmad Sheikh. When I came here, one of the main questions that I wanted to ask the many different experts that are available here was, how do you manage to engage all the stakeholders in your country? This particular effort. And I was amazed by the different ways it's working. It's working in a completely privatized health sector, as well as the semi-government and the more government-controlled health sectors in different countries. However, what I see still missing is this kind of national agreement on adopting these profiles as part of the system. What I see, and this is from the discussions that I went through, is that there is something that needs to be at the mandates and regulations level to ensure that there is much more alignment between the different players in their sectors. And you might want to kind of focus on this and give specific recommendations to different members on how to approach this. And I think that would require more focus on the on preparation of documents that would assist different members of different countries go through their own experience. Just like with the development of profiles. I mean, some work need to be done, just like the one done on the technical aspect of things. Some work need to be done as well on the governance and regulatory part of things, in a way that also suits the needs of the different
Interesting comments. What do other people think? Would you agree, disagree?
I do actually quite agree with that comment. I also want to point out something that nobody said. There was a comment a lot about process as being one of the assets. I also think that our artifacts are one of our assets. The reason I say that, when we were at the WHO meeting in December, one of the truths for especially certain sectors like developing countries or anyone, the base standards themselves are not digestible. There isn't really a way to say how they hang together to do a unit of work. I think that one of the things you pointed out, Charles, is that we have to take our profiles and say how do they hang together to satisfy the needs for national infrastructure, for instance, or for regional infrastructure. And I do think that that's one of our assets today, is that our profiles document how base standards do a unit of work. I think one of our weaknesses is that we have to say how do our profiles hang together to provide infrastructure. I do think that many of our profiles have an applied architecture to them. I think we would be well served by saying how they can together work in different architectures. The Canadian design is somewhat a centralized architecture. The US design is somewhat a very decentralized architecture. You can use profiles in both ways. We should start to say how that works.
Thank you. Two excellent statements that really, if I think what you're saying is the IHE process stops a little too soon. We need a few more pieces of processes to engage adopters. This is what I've heard from Dr. Bécher. And from you, we need a little bit of technical guidance on how to cook and bake a deployable architecture from the profile. So I think this is a very good statement. I would like people to react on it, and one of my reactions is to say, this is exactly what IHE does. We've always refined and stretched our processes as needed and as demanded. What we have always realized is that if we try to embrace too much too soon, we get lost. We don't have any focus. And I think what Mark Nussbaum was saying is deployment, how do we deploy from a stakeholder engagement, from an architecture, from a design standpoint, and both are two sides almost of the same coin. I think that's indeed where we want to go. Do people agree with those statements? And if you agree, does anyone has some specific suggestions on how to do that? Is it something we need to do country by country? Is it something we can do somehow regionally or globally? Because I'm tempted to say, Dr. Bécher, I'm sure the way adoption will work in Saudi Arabia is going to be likely different than adoption is going to work in the Veneto region. The political structure, the mindset, the culture, the way people have done healthcare IT are different, and we need to respect those differences and start from those points. We may end up closer in the end, but we need to do that. So how can IHE help specifically without going too deep into the specific and get lost?
Charles Peter McHusing, I certainly agree with that comment that the profile it is all a bit arcane, and while you were talking about keeping it contained and not going out, I mean, IHE has been focusing on pragmatics, developing new profiles and technical and testing and showcases, but to some extent we have got to get ahead of ourselves in terms of bringing it all together. I mean, we have bits of profiles in different. If you want to implement XDS, you need to borrow a bit from this profile and a bit from that profile, and there's a team downstairs trying to explain to vendors how this happens, but it's not exactly obvious. We've now got a lot of success stories, but the only place you can really go to find out where it's IHE implemented is the motorcycle guy blog site, the map from your colleague at GE.
Yeah, where in the world?
Where in the world is XDS. But we don't, and now we actually have, and in this meeting, people are talking about what they're doing. We should be able to leverage that and market those implementations in different types of environments because at the end of the day, we have to influence, like the comment about IHE Turkey, and we have the same problem in Australia. The nature of these government programs is that they often get together with they have consultants who will come in from Deloitte or whoever, and I don't have any sense that those people who are the consultants really know much about IHE. We have to be able to market what we do to the people who influence the decisions, and through them to the national bodies and programs. We've got there is a lot of material, but it requires resources and someone to put it all together. And I suspect IHE internationally is struggling like we all are with lack of resources. We have relatively few people really to provide that leadership, and they don't have the time to sit down and identify all of the projects and analyse them and present them in a way that can be marketed. So, but I think those extra layers, as you say, we stop too soon. If we were a company selling a product, we would be taking what we've done now and packaging it up, working out who our market is, presenting it in a way for the different markets. But all of that does require budget and effort, and I think that's one of the weaknesses we currently have in IHE is we don't have the resources to do that.
Thank you. Other comments or suggestions on how to progress what should be our focus? I think we've already heard some of those.
Thanks, Charles. I'd like to echo a lot of the discussion around success stories, and our colleague from IHE Turkey I think illustrated the need for demonstrating success as we approach our national organizations. And this is a very important topic that I think all of us share. And we struggle with how to draw out success stories. And I just wanted to update on a couple of points. The first is that we now in IHE.net have a new facility to take input from those that have success stories, and we need to market that more. But if you're interested, if you have success stories and you want to share them, see Chris Carr, who will point you to the URL where you can actually upload your success stories. The issue on success stories is a little tricky because it's not all about success stories about how we've done such a good job with IHE. The success story is how we've used IHE to help us do a unit of work, if you will, or to help our national infrastructure. And so it's not only about IHE, it's how IHE was instrumental in contributing to that. So that's the challenge we have in Canada. I can't tell you what the IHE success stories are, but I can tell you where we've used IHE in successful projects. And I think we need to gather more of that information to help our colleagues around the world to make an appropriate approach and successful approach to help our national infrastructure see the value in IHE.
Yeah, I want to just add on that topic raised by Luke there. The success story concept is rather different if you, which is the evidence. You say from the user side that what we do in as a success is rather different if you talk about a hospital environment or large regional project. When you go there, you just don't need to say, well, we support IHE XDS, for instance, because that by itself is not a self-explanatory statement. It's just the beginning, because there are so many things that go into into an XDS deployment, let's say what we call the affinity domain things like what, you know, the content, you know, the CDA definition, and so on and so forth. And then I was listening, I was invited by IHE Austria to give a keynote that was in November, and I was listening to the ELGA process. The ELGA is the Austrian EHR national program. So I mean, you know, the steps needed to be, you know, that is the important information that should be sent out in terms, and that is of course very complex to deal with from the communication point of view, because also it requires that the listener are able to understand that kind of information, and not all the people that all those stakeholders that we are addressing are the same level of understanding, not only at IHE but also the healthcare delivery process, and not because of they coming from different countries, because they're coming from different kind of professional backgrounds.
I would like to make a comment on something that I find amazing. I am reading specification developed by projects, essentially regional and national projects from all around the world. And I would say there's about 30 to 40 of those projects that are actually operational. Probably, you know, millions of patients, 10, 20, 30, 50 million total, have their records being exchanged today, and it is working. We don't have the way to view that, we don't have the way to count that, but I can tell you this is quite impressive. But that's not the most impressive. The most impressive is I can read one of those specs based on IHE profile in about a couple hours. I know what they've used. I know the extension they've done. The specifications are between 500 and 800 pages at most. You cannot imagine the efficiency that this provides. I remember our colleagues from the NHS when they had done in earlier days, before IHE existed, the national specification just to share patient records is 6,000 pages thick. I have never been able to read that spec from beginning to the end. You cannot digest that. As soon as you take a spec built on IHE profile, you can digest it in a few hours. To me, this is such a revolution, because it means that the vendors will need to comply, have a chance to understand what they need to do. The people will need to do the testing, have a sense, a way to reuse things, to know what they need to test. Has anybody done a similar experience in reading those specifications? Likewise, I remember an interesting discussion on an IHE-based deployment in Canada with an IHE-based deployment in Japan. Two groups of people who have never met, and in about 2 hours they knew precisely what they were doing, they knew where their use cases were, and they were able to discuss their challenges. Absolutely amazing. Have you had that experience? Do you believe that's a correct experience or not?
Okay. One of the weaknesses I see is that we need to bring the healthcare professionals to a meeting like this. IHE is more about IE, integrating the enterprise. Where is the healthcare process? We are now talking about the differences, but we have one standard that we are not using a lot. It's actually the global standard of treating patients. If we could have the professionals actually describing their daily work and see what kind of problems they are facing, and then when people like you with expertise within IHE could show them good success stories of this is the way it could be done, then I think we could have a good deployment of IHE locally. And the deployment of the local IHE should be focusing on differences. And on a global level, we should look for the similarities that we actually have within the healthcare process. Thanks.
Maybe one more comment, then we have to
Yeah,
go to the
what's the
second.
next question?
Hello. I'm from Austria, and I'm representing the hospitals of Vienna. And we are part of the Austrian Health Record Project. We are working with it, and our only problem or struggling point we have in this ongoing discussion and work is that from the vision of a hospital, this whole project is only one of the projects we want to realize in the IHE technologies. So everything I always hear is you're working on one project with one infrastructure and one architecture, but we want to reuse it for other kind of e-health applications. So we want to reuse the base of patients we have stored in a patient index for different applications where there can be different sets, subsets, supersets of patients for different kind of applications. We want to reuse the registry for different kind of applications. And we have also the point of view that it should be possible to use a lot of different policy repositories because we have different policies depending on the e-health application we want to use. We are right now focused only on the Austrian Health Record project, but we want to reuse all this kind of infrastructure we right now are building. We are buying software and hardware for it for a lot of different applications. And what I'm missing, maybe it's only my weakness of knowledge of IHE, but what I'm missing is this more general point of view of this technology. Not only realizing one project, which where all the specifications are quite precisely defined, but also reusing it for different applications. Maybe in the future, where I don't even know the exact specifications which will come up to me. So I would like to have a more broad view of this technology, more ability to plug in different applications at different times.
This is a very nice comment, especially because it leads us to the next question. So, is the IHE profile portfolio broad enough? What is missing? Is it more profile, or is it more ways to use them for a variety of applications? Interesting perspective. Let me share my opinion and maybe provide some input to your comment. It seems to me that the portfolio is reasonably broad. I would not say complete. I would say reasonably broad for most projects and the most classical basic application. And I think this has been the goal of IHE. IHE is not here to solve world hunger in interoperability. This will eventually come, but we will all be retired in many years. Such the problem is big in my opinion. So as we move forward, I'm hearing two feedback. One of them is there are too many profiles. I cannot choose them now. It takes me too long to walk through them and understand them. So get rid of give me what are the main ones. I want to sort it. Give me the short list. I'm hearing, like you do, the problem is not with the number of profiles, but it's the way you navigate them. How do I start with an application, a need, and I go to find what's relevant to address that need in that environment? This is often written, but in many places, in small prints, in the navigation, I believe, is definitely a significant issue. So my personal view, and we'll see what the other panelists and what you would like to bring to this question, is the portfolio, I think, is broad enough. We need to grow it in areas that are new areas. I see, for example, mobile health, which is an area that the IT infrastructure team is growing, but it's growing with a big warning. Mobile health is not about content, it's about transport of information, it's about access of information. So don't put mobile health in the clinical content, it's an infrastructure problem. And very often we have a tendency to kind of collapse everything. So I think that is a correct growth, but I think the bigger issue to me is how can I find and know what profile to use for what application? Claudio.
Oh, very interesting comments. First of all, let's go to the last. When I'm talking, I present myself, I not say that I'm responsible for the IHE regional, Veneto regional project, but I say that I'm responsible for the real project, that means Regional Healthcare Information Organization. Why? Because the history of Veneto is very strange. In 2006, we have run a European project called Health Optimum, this is a success story, that is based on telecom selling for neurosurgical programs. We have decided to use XDS approach. And so we use XDS for telemedicine. That seems not the right profile to use, because when you're talking about the XDS, you're thinking about the sharing of the documents. Yes, we use an XDS, and now there is a network of surgery that are running in Veneto region that they use this profile. Then, when we move to the next level of the game, 1 year ago, our political level decided to move to e-prescription. We spent only 2 years to develop the e-prescription project because we use the same infrastructure. We use the same XDS infrastructure to solve the problem for e-prescription. And this is very important because the portfolio of IHE profile is large enough. There are some new features in new domains, but for traditional project, the portfolio is large enough. Another important point that I have remarked in Saudi Arabia is what is the right connection between profiles, technical framework, connected on same projects. Because this is the connection we have in Europe, the experience of EPSOS project. I think that we have a different approach when we move to projects. Because when we're talking about project, we have to talk with the decision makers, with the political level of the game. And so we have the same approach that we have when we're talking about evidence-based medicine, when we're talking about HTA approach. If we have to explain to a decision maker if or not to buy a PET CT, we use HTA approach. Then we need evidence of the use of the IHE profile. And so I think that success stories are a key point, because success stories are the evidence of this approach. When I have to explain to my political level in Veneto region of what means IHE approach, I talking to them about the InfoWay project in Canada and say, this is a project that are running, that is based on IHE. This is the right approach. Then I have to explain to them what is the benefit of IHE involvement. Because it's very important to understand that in this crisis, economical crisis time, we have to reduce the cost. And IHE is a very interesting way to reduce the time and the cost of the development and deployment of the project. This is my opinion.
Thank you. Jörg?
So, if you ask what we are missing in the whole IHE, and I go back to the last comment here, is that we are missing visionary users. As you know, IHE is a grassroots organization driven by champions, by volunteers. which means that users of Windows can have a large impact. If you want to develop something, you can stand up and you can start the development of a profile. So if you look to the overall process for defining and selecting profiles, this started, I think, once a year in October. There are planning meetings where users play an important role to identify real-world interoperability problems. And they define the priorities for the new profiles to be developed in the coming 18 months. What we see for some of the domains that we prioritize sometimes wrong profiles. And said that those profiles, when they are finished, are not adopted by the vendors or by the users. So we have a lot of profiles which are sitting on the shelf and which are not implemented in products. And one of the reasons that we did not prioritize them well because we did not have the right involvement of the visionary users in those committees. So my request is to you is how could we engage better the user community in the prioritization process of IHE.
Thank you. Hello? Do you have an answer to that?
Yeah, I don't have an answer, but I have questions. From our perspective, I think IHE profiles are enough now to start with. But starting with somewhere is getting sometimes confusing because now the problems are being much bigger. If you look at, it's not at a hospital level, now it's a regional level, it's a country level. When it comes to a country level, and advising MOH, I'm going to come back to the same question. It needs a lot of resources, as my Australian colleague said. So, government is asking something to you that how we can work with IHE and then how we can solve these problems. Then, okay, we have the profiles there. These are the solutions for this governance problem. But how are we going to, as a local organization, how are we going to combine them and then present them to the solution that people are asking for? That's my question.
Thank you. Thoughts, comments, ideas from the audience?
One of the difficulties that we've encountered is that there are many profiles that exist in theory, but the actual status of the profile is unclear. And when you go down into it, they've been developed, but they've never been finalized. And there's no support for them in the tool set. It's unclear from the documentation on the website exactly what the situation is, whether that profile is not going to be finalized or whether there's some timeline over which the profile is to be completed. So those sorts of profiles, it's difficult to get to grips with unless you're actually a member of the community. Australia having limited resources, we're not a member of most of the community, so it's actually quite difficult to understand what's happening with those profiles. The other situation we've had is that it's difficult to get information on what profiles are currently under development across all of the domains, so that certainly with government planning cycles, which are usually long term, it's very easy for them to say, oh, we're going to develop this ourselves, because it's unknown that in fact IHE is developing or may even be close to completing a profile that does exactly what they want. So there is a need to better describe what the current work items are, what their current status is, where they are in the tooling cycle in terms of the implementation of the tooling cycle, and if they're not yet complete, what the timeline is for them to complete it. To give a specific example, we've had the situation where we have a national XDS infrastructure. The government wanted to implement dynamic documents in that XDS infrastructure because they were ordered to utilize the existing databases, but chose to do it their own way because the XDS profile of that is not yet finalized, it's not yet been finally published. And it was actually quite difficult to know or find out what the timeline was. Thank you. It's very bad.
Yeah, good comment. I think there are some discussion we need on this, but let's take the other comment.
Yes, hello. My name is Edward. I'm representing an Austrian company. We are in the LGAT project. And first step is we have no problem implementing IHE because in Austria, we as a company receive very strict implementation guidelines, and so it's easy for us to implement net profiles for our customers, so no problem. But we are part of Company Group. Company Group is an international company providing about 400,000 GPs around the world with software. And there we are facing a huge problem because we have a lot of ideas. And we know that implementing IHE all over the world in our customer base would be great. But it's so complicated to develop our ideas, which are small projects in IHE, because it's easier to make it in our own way than to implement the whole IHE structure we need to solve a single tiny functionality. Yeah, you know, this is a real problem to us. And the next problem is that your answer could be, yeah, there's standard software available, take this and that, and you take your windows and your doors and your steps and you put it together, and then you have the solution. I can tell you, no, because we don't want to buy standard software. We want to do all the software we sell in our own structure, because we don't want to pay license fees forever. So we want to generate license fees, but if we want to implement all our ideas into our huge customer base, it takes us years to implement IHE. That's the real problem to us. And so I don't know how to solve it. We have a huge market, but it would take us, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 years to build the standard functionality of IHE, then to implement our function or functionality on top. So it's a real problem to us, and I don't know how to solve it. So maybe there is some answer. I don't know.
Thank you. Claudio, would you like to provide some feedback or comments?
Very short comment. In our experience in Veneto, we spend a lot of time and we spend a lot of effort to convince the small companies that develop the AHR for GP to include IHE profiles in the software, of course. And it's very difficult, but for example, we say to them, now we have to implement a document source for XDS to publish the e-prescription. It's very fighting, but at the end, they understand the real benefit of this approach. Because when we are moving to the next level of the game, say, now you have to display the report of your referral, for example, for lab request, you use the same infrastructure, the same knowledge that you have understand, that you have learned during the first phase. The first phase is very difficult, but the second phase is very short.
So your answer, Claudio, is to say, in a sense, yes, the entry
It's very difficult.
is real work, but then the incremental steps of extending functionality, extending content are easier. Is that something that you would agree? So for the small project, it's a challenge, but as soon as the projects grow over time, it becomes more value.
You're right. Yeah, we have no problem implementing that Austrian healthcare record because we have very strict implementation guidelines. No problem to us. Yeah, we make this, and we have really no problem, and we see the advantage of this technology. But for our whole customer base, I say 500,000 of GPs worldwide is the customer base we are facing next year. There we have the problems. To take IHE as the base of our further developments. This is our problem. Because we need to implement all IHE structure into our software. And this takes even
is it because
huge.
Is it because those countries or those communities have no clear strategy on interoperability?
No. We as a company need to decide on our future developments. And we think that IHE could be a very good structure. But if we change now our strategy, it will take us years to end up with the real solution. This is our problem.
Are you leveraging what you've done in Austria to put it in other environments?
We try, but our problem is to start now IHE development from the scratch to the full functionality, and this takes time. This takes time, and this is our problem. So because we know, for instance, DNA, it took him 10 years to build up the profiles, and this exactly is the problem to us. So we could solve all problems, but time is for sure missing, and it's sometimes too complicated for us.
Comment from Bernie?
I would comment on that. I understand the problem. We saw the same problem. That's why we started the company 6 years ago to try to solve this problem. And I can tell you it took us many years to be able to, for instance, adopt many or all of the IHE profiles that we want to support to come out. So I can imagine your problem. And the problem is not solvable by yourself. It's too big to digest, I guess. So there is no easy solution to it. There's no toolkit lying around, let's say, on the open internet, open source that you can take and work. It's too new, it's too advanced.
And would the users be even able to, swallow and adopt all of that chain? So in a sense, IHE gives the modules and leave to the project the strategy of what subset to take, when, and how to grow that. And for the vendors, they also are free to build the modules as they want. The question is the vendors have to meet the projects and hopefully align their strategy. And that's sometimes easy, sometimes more difficult. Pierre Michael was next. Pierre Michael, you have a comment? Jürgen? On this side, trying to remember, and then Eric and Lapo.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think the issue so far is if you have a big customer base in, let's say, legacy system, then I think for sure it takes time to adapt your software, but there must be also a market. And I think this is somehow the real problem and the issue. It comes back to what the colleague of Saudi, for example, said at the beginning. We have, from the objective perspective, we have the possibility that someone in Germany can use the IHE profiles, and someone in Japan, or today I arrived here by bus with a colleague of Korea. So it's, from the objective perspective, it's very easy. But then we have on the national level, then we have different issues to push IHE in this way, that IHE becomes some like a regulatory aspect, or so that it's that IHE becomes so important that you as the vendor has to go for it. For example, Austria, the technical framework is based on IHE, or if you go to the United States of America, if you want to participate in the all-over meaningful use program and your software belongs not to IHE, you have issues, you have problems, so you go for it. So I think to improve that, to have markets, to push all that initiatives, we need some ideas, programs on the national level. For this, you need on the national level very good supporters, a very good relationship to the hospital managers, to the doctors, to the users, because we have definitely not enough users here. If you talk about Europe, about international board, there are not enough users, really users. Yeah? Not we like IT guys, really users. Really doctors who are working that day, with really hospital directors who are in charge. These are not enough. We need also more politicians. Yeah? So I think this is a real problem. If you have a market, development is not a problem. It's only a time for it.
Okay, thank you. Eric is next. That's the floor.
I am Derek Ritz, and one of the things that I'm sensing from this is that many of our profiles were developed at a time when integrating the healthcare enterprise was in the hospital, and we were connecting this to that. And one of the truths is, and this is a good thing, is that now we're talking about connecting everything to everything. When you're connecting everything to everything, the expectation that there's going to be some national infrastructure, or that there will be some mechanism or some profiles that are specified nationally that must be adopted, that is market making. And I do think that we need to have a representation from our users. I think that the comment about having politicians, having representatives from ministries of health is going to be important. For the work that I'm doing in the countries that I'm working in right now, everything is a projected model. There's absolutely zero interest in the Minister of Health regarding how this or that is going to connect inside the four walls of a hospital. What they are having to articulate is how all of the hospitals are going to share information about a particular patient, how all of the primary care facilities are going to be able to order labs and get the lab results, and how they're going to be able to order drugs and get the drug results. We refer to them as the Magnificent Seven. There's a very few transactions that support the shared health information about a particular national citizen. And where we get to the point that IHE profiles are being described as a collection of them that are going to be embraced by a country, then we're making markets for the vendors to have products that connect into that shared infrastructure. And so that's the next step for us. We should be very ready for it, because honestly, we shouldn't be surprised by our own success. That's an embarrassing thing for insight.
Here, Michael.
The question for the vendors, it's a bit like a chicken, it's a bit like a balloon. Clearly, when you're blowing up a balloon, the first bit, talking about the various laws of physics, telling you the first bit of expanding that balloon will be hard, and then as it gets bigger, it becomes easier and easier. And so it's getting this critical mass of IHE profiles in different countries and places that matters. But I think vendors have an important role in realising that if you want to sell into different markets and you don't want to develop proprietary this bit for Australia, this bit for Austria, this bit for Sweden, and so on. It's in the vendor's interest to promote the IHE profile. So at least your vendors here know about IHE and you're capable of promoting it and putting it forward in the RFG responses and saying, well, if you want me to do this job, it has to be IHE, otherwise I can't afford to do it economically. So I think vendors have to actually be telling the healthcare authorities, you know, in the planning phases, we don't care quite how you do it as long as you use IHE. Whether we win the job or someone else wins the job. But at least I think it's, if that's coming from lots of vendors and consultants, it's about how we market to the people who are decision makers. Yes, it would be nice if the environment was already there where people were asking for IHE, but in some respects I think the vendor community has to help drive it as well. But rather than saying, as vendors perhaps I've said in the past, well, you just tell us what you want and we'll work out the way to do it. But I think we're all facing the same exactly this problem. But the other issue that was raised earlier is about infrastructure. In Australia, and I think in many countries in the world, because things are built in projects, we talk about project-a-thons, a project has a defined objective, a budget, a timeline, and you give the project to do e-prescribing to a manager, he will say, okay, I've got to deliver this by this date, and they will try and reduce complexity by limiting reliance on everything else. They would tend to try and develop their own way of doing it, their own standards. And what we're in Australia is a whole series of parallel roads. This road has been built for the prescriptions, this road has been built for the messaging, this road is built for the shared healthcare records. And each of these roads has to plough through suburbs, which are the existing infrastructure and so on. And we're destroying them, and the cost of doing these parallel infrastructures is very high. So somehow or another we have to be able to tell the story that IHE can deliver on one infrastructure multiple functions. And I think we all know that intuitively. And somehow that message has to be got up there in advance before people get into the building the road for the prescriptions, the road for the referrals, the road for the health record.
Thank you, Peter. One last comment, and then we will wrap up and take a little break before the next session.
Thank you. I love having the last word. I'd like to go back to an earlier comment that Gert put on the table around the choices that are made in the selection of profiles and whether those choices are sustainable and whether there is a long-term benefit and how can we do a better job. So we've heard a lot about the variability amongst our different countries, and we've heard a lot about what I'm going to call health reform, which is the dynamic change of healthcare. Each of us is experiencing new ways of delivering care, and we have to be reactive to all that. We're also hearing about dynamic changes in markets and how vendors now are, for the most part, multinational vendors. They sell into different marketplaces, and it's too expensive to create something that's proprietary for this environment, proprietary to that. So there's a whole number of factors that are on the table, and I'd like to go back to the issue about how do we do a better job of deciding where to spend our resources. When Charles and I were the co-chairs of ITI, we took a good hard look at how we can improve the process of getting input to where ITI should go and under what priority. And in the old days, it used to be people would come to meetings and whoever would take off their shoe and yell the loudest would typically get high on the priority list, and that's where the profile development would go. I am extremely encouraged by what I'm hearing today and want to suggest that we need to now embark on a new way of getting input, and that is from the deployment committees directly. I think that our markets are dictated by those of you who are delivering service or requesting service, whether you're a vendor or a user, in different parts of the world with all of the variability that's associated with it, not just geographically, but also health reform and shifting markets. And we need to listen to that in the domains. And so we need to develop processes for soliciting that kind of input so that if Saudi Arabia has a particular problem that isn't being met by IHE, and Austria has a particular problem that is not being met, we need to get that input into our development cycle in a very, very profound way, and we need to think about how we should do that. I don't think we have the answer today, but I'm encouraged by trying to think about how we harness the energy of this room on an ongoing basis to build our suite of artifacts to be more reflective of what we need today across the world.
Thank you, Mike. Maybe a couple clarification for people who are maybe wondering. In the IHE process, when profiles are being developed, there are essentially 3 levels, 4 levels. The first one is the profile scope is being defined. It's a short document, 3, 4, 5 page, the use case, the need, the requirement of what you want to do. At that time, you don't know the answer, there is no standard, just a problem to solve. Then the profile moves to public comment, which means now there is a solution that is specified based on the most widely accepted standards in that area. You glue the pieces together. That's the profile definition, which is in public comment. And I think at that time, we're getting feedback, but I think this is also something where a broader feedback would be useful. Is this problem the right problem? Is the solution the right solution? Based on those comments, the profile moves to trial implementation. And this is an important thing when you look at a profile and you see that profile is in trial implementation. You say, aha, this has been defined, this has been vetted, but this is not yet proven in the real world. And the profile will not move from trial implementation until final text, until there are 3 different implementations tested into 2 parts of the world, and that have proven interoperable using that profile. So you may have profiles that are not yet final text. They may be good profiles, they may be quite serious. They actually are being used in a number of projects. But there is not enough of a broad implementation and a feedback to give the assurance that this is solid. So IHE says use them. We're not going to change them for the pleasure, but there may be flaws in them. There may be significant correction that needs to be done because we didn't think of everything when we designed it. So IHE has this process, and I agree with the comment that was made that understanding this, and when you access a profile, knowing what the status is not always easy or clear if you don't understand the process and those statuses. So again, this is a bit of a chicken and egg. You see that IHE has thought through a process, but if you don't understand this, you may read specification and not quite know that this little word here, public comment. Oh, okay, public comment means I need to speak up. And it's unlikely to be implementable as such. Trial implementation, it's implementable. Okay, but I'm taking a bit of risk. Final text, I'm taking very little risk. It's stable. Okay, so those are some of the clarifications that exist, and communicating those more clearly is definitely a challenge that is worth noting and addressing. Having made this comment, I would like to close this session and basically summarize 3 main thoughts. The first one is the adoption process involving the users and their engagement in understanding the profile vis-à-vis their need, and engaging the architect and the people that are specifying for a project and making their life easier to build their spec by pulling the profile. Call that, adoption for users, adoption for technical folks. Those seems to be areas where we've heard several comments and say we need improvement, we need clarity on information, and there are things we should be able to do at the global level so that we all are better and make our life easier within our country. on the second question, I think we came back to almost the same problem. Nobody complained that there was not enough profile. Some mentioned that some of those are very little used. So we need to be better at prioritizing or at cleaning the house, or recognizing that in some cases we are ahead of the world. Okay, that happens, you know. So we again have a prioritization, and essentially what I've heard here on this prioritization, we go back to the adoption problem. Because if we had a more stronger adoption process, the feedback would be there and would prevent some of those prioritization mishaps. Now, on the positive side, I want to say that despite its mishap, the prioritization has worked, I would say, 80% correct. But we should not stop there. And let's make it 90, 95%. We don't need to spend our energy on things that are not priorities. This is essentially what I think has been the takeaways from this morning's session. I hope that you've heard things that have allowed you to better understand how IHE is working, how we can all together take the whole organization and process to the next step. So we would like to stop here. Thank you very much for your input. We want more. Please continue to discuss those topics. And if you think my summary is not quite right, catch me in the coffee room and say, Charles, you forgot this point at that point, and I will gladly add it to the paper. Thank you very much. Have a good break. We are resuming when? Yoga.